Hello, my friends. Hello, my little cupcakes. And thank you so much for coming to hang out with me on this Saturday evening, October 28th. It's been a very busy week in the true crime world with the Maine debacle. And finally, that is over, thank goodness. And I've been covering the Maya trial for you and watching it daily. And that's been taking up a lot of time. So this story about Blaze Thibaudeau is one that really just came to my attention yesterday. And I wanted to bring this to you. I was actually going to bring this to you last night. And I made a whole video because Nate Eaton at East Idaho News did an interview with Blaze's dad and Blaze's sister's husband. And Blaze was missing. So I made just a missing person video for my friends in Canada to please be on the lookout because it had been confirmed that the party of four had traveled into Canada. And I really didn't get salacious with it. And I didn't talk about doomsday prepping or religion or anything. I just wanted to have my viewers in Canada have eyes out and to be on the lookout for Blaze and the people he was traveling with because his father was desperately trying to find him. So I made this whole video, and right as I was uploading it to YouTube, the news broke that he was found safe, and that is so amazing. So today, what I would like to do with you is to unpack the rest of this story. And in order to do that, we have a very special guest. But I would just like to know who in the chat knows about this story about Blaze Thibaudeau. And if you do know about it, just put a Y in the chat just so I can see how familiar you are with it. I'm going to give you a very quick overview before I bring on my guest, and we're going to talk about it together. And save your questions for the end because Mike is here to answer questions as well. So on Monday, the 23rd of October, 16-year-old Arizona high school football player Blaze Thibaudeau was picked up from school at around 10:15 in the morning by his mother. Her name is Spring Thibaudeau. And she told Blaze that they were going to go on a surprise trip for his birthday. And she picked him up at school, and they went to pick up his sister, and her name is Abby. And they picked Abby up at her apartment. They drove to the Phoenix airport. They got on a flight to Boise, Idaho, where they were picked up by his uncle and Spring's brother. His name is Brooke Hale. From there, we didn't know until last night what happened. But Ben got very worried when he couldn't reach Blaze on Monday, and he got a phone call from Abby's husband, and his name is Braden. And Braden told him some really shocking news. Braden told Ben that when he got home that day, Abby called him at work and said, I have to go to the hospital. I'm really sick. So he came home. He noticed the Ring doorbell camera was missing from his front door. He went inside. He said the house was a mess. She was frantically packing. And he said, where are you going? And she said, it's time. We have to leave. It's end of days. We have to go. We're flying to Boise and we're going to get picked up by Brooke, who is also Abby's uncle. And we're going. She had bought thousands of dollars in survival equipment, all kinds of food. And apparently Spring, Abby, and Brooke Hale, had been planning this for quite some time. So Ben freaks out, right? Because he had just filed for divorce about a week before this. And he said in his interview that Spring had wanted to get divorced, but because of the religion, she didn't feel like she could file because in Arizona, the divorce records are public. So although they had a 25-year marriage, Ben said they were having a great relationship and he had really no indication that this was coming. So he went to the Gilbert police and I don't know if he got any help in Gilbert, but he flew to Boise and he went to the Boise police and he thought the Boise police would help him because he needed to track down his son. Because as we know, with all of these crazy stories happening out of Gilbert, Arizona and Idaho, the endings of these stories are not always positive, let's just say. So he flew to Boise and the Boise police wouldn't really do anything to help him, but eventually the FBI got involved. On Tuesday, Ben's attorney filed an emergency motion in the family court to get custody of Blaze, told them the whole story. In fact, in the court papers, Ben's attorney mentions Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell and says to the judge, listen, you need to do something about this immediately because we have seen how these cases lately have been going. And mom is a doomsday prepper, and she has taken her son. She thinks that he is a prophet and that he is instrumental in the second coming, and he didn't know where they were going, and time was of the essence that they had to find his son. So last night, it was reported, the phones were off, everything. There was no communication. He couldn't get a hold of them. Abby had, in fact, texted her husband and said, listen, I love you. I'm going to be gone for a couple of years. Goodbye. Brooke left a 3-page letter, I think, to his children, which was basically like a last will and testament. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. Here's who gets what. So it was a very dire situation. The 4 of them were found last night on the eastern coast of Alaska. They had crossed into Canada, and I believe they were coming back into the US over the Alaskan border, and that's where they were stopped because there was a warrant out for the arrest of Brooke and Spring, brother and sister. I wonder if they had any other kids and what their names were, but that's interesting. Brooke and Spring, there was an arrest warrant, a warrant out for their arrest on felony charges of interfering with custody and conspiracy to commit custodial interference. So hopefully by now, I haven't heard any word, but I hope that Blaze has been brought back to his dad and they have been extradited from Alaska back to Arizona, where the family lives. But this was such a crazy story, and it all happened so quickly because nothing really hit the news until Thursday. But here we are. It's a very happy ending. But I thought to myself, I know a lot of you guys don't know about this either. So what is the end of days? What are these beliefs? Why are we seeing so many cases like this coming out of Arizona and Idaho and Utah? Are these extreme religious beliefs? Is this a cult? Is this religion? Who do I know that can help explain this to us? And I thought, I know exactly who knows a lot about cults and religion and who's been profiling criminals for more than 30 years, maybe even 40 years. He even took down a cult in Utah in 1991. He is also the host of the Profiling Evil podcast. I am proud to introduce to you, I'm a big fan, Mike King.
Hey,
hello,
Melanie,
Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well tonight. Thank you. And it's late for you East Coasters, but thank you so much for letting me join you.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know that you're in another time zone, let's say. I won't dox you if you don't want people to know where you are, but I'm a night owl anyway, and my Colorado Buffs are on the TV losing right now, so I have no problem being here with you. So let's I just want to play a quick video where they talk about, give a little bit more background. This is from the local Arizona news station, and let me see if we can get that on here. And they're just going to talk a little bit more about the rescue, let's say.
Okay.
All right, you guys, let me know if you can hear this.
Breaking news is happening right now on 12 News at 10 o'clock this Friday night. In just the last 15 minutes, we have learned that a Gilbert teen reported missing earlier this week has been found at the Alaskan border.
That's right. The teen was found with his mom. The breaking details coming into the newsroom just a few minutes ago. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kariba Devine.
I'm Jonathan McCall. 12 News journalist Chase Golightly has been following this story all night long. He is live tonight in Gilbert with the new information he has just received. Chase, what do you know?
Jonathan Krebe, I'll tell you, this brings a huge sense of relief, not only to Blaze Thibaudeau's father, who's been searching for him for the last couple of days, but also the community here in Gilbert, who was very concerned about this 16-year-old safety. And as you mentioned, this new information being released to us within the last 15 minutes from Gilbert police, saying that Blaze Thibaudeau was found thousands of miles away at the Alaska border on the eastern side. They said it was U.S. Customs and Border Protection who were there. They said not only did they find the 16-year-old, they also found his mother, Spring Thibaudeau, his uncle, and also his sister, again, driving thousands of miles away to be able to get to that Alaskan border. What we also know is that, of course, Blaze is safe for now, as they're going to be sending him back here to Arizona to be reunited with his father. We also know that Spring Thibaudeau, Blaze's mother, and also his uncle are arrested. They will be extradited back to the United States. As for a timeline on that, we're still waiting to learn about that. But again, this has been a big case here in the Valley as we were searching for the 16-year-old. We did speak with his father, Ben, earlier today, who said he was very concerned for his son's safety. And the reason being is because, according to the father and also the court documents that we received today, is that his mother, again, Spring Thibaudeau, had taken Blaze out of state and against his will as part of his mother's end of the world Doomsday belief system. Ben told us that for years, Spring Thibaudeau was under the impression that the world was coming to an end, and she also thought that her son Blaze, the 16-year-old, would actually be key in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. On Monday, Spring Thibaudeau took Blaze out of Gilbert High School. She pulled him out, and from there, they went to Sky Harbor Airport. They flew to Idaho. From there, they got in a car and drove all the way into Canada. From there, that's where a lot of concern was. We didn't know exactly where they were in Canada. We were told that they packed a lot of snow gear. We were told that they were in an SUV that could easily go off-roading, so they could have been anywhere. But now we finally know that they are located, again, near on the eastern border of Alaska. Blaze is safe, again, bringing a lot of relief, and 2 people are in custody at this time.
Lots of new information. Glad to see that he is okay. A lot of folks who definitely concerned, as Chase mentioned. We'll continue to monitor this story throughout the night at 12news.com and bring you updates as soon as we learn more. Chase Golightly for us live tonight in Gilbert. Chase, thank you.
So, Mike, what do you make of that? I mean, I can't even imagine how devastating that would be as a father to know that your son is missing and taken by his mother, who maybe has extreme religious beliefs. Help me understand this.
You know, it's really hard not to immediately want to start judging like the parents in these kinds of wacky situations. And you think about this dad who finally steps up, makes the flight to Idaho, is hitting every news station he can. I mean, when he finally realizes that this thing has gone south on him, he jumps in and he goes to town, does the right thing, and really steps up. What was going on for those 6 months during marital discord and separation? You know, we're seeing kind of the same thing in the Frankie case, where mom and dad were living these 2 separate lives, but trying to let everybody think that they were living one, or that it was working out. And I don't know, I guess after 45 years with the same companion and spouse, I don't think she'd ever put up with that. And I know I certainly wouldn't put up with that wackiness of, oh, okay, I'll move out and you kind of run things and do it the way you want, so that we don't get embarrassed in the public. It's like they completely abandon the most important possession they have, which is their children. That's a whole bunch more important until those kids are on their own and thriving and doing their own thing than what you might feel or what your companion might feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is that something that is common, that is divorce frowned upon in the LDS community? Is it something that, would that be part of her religion? Why she wouldn't want to get divorced, or why people might try and pretend they're still together? Or is that just have nothing to do with the belief system?
This to me really is interesting, Melanie. And, I had the opportunity of running the Ritual Crime Task Force for a number of years for the state. And, I was every weekend I was at a different polygamous community or a different closed society, a cult that was practicing weird behaviors. And immediately I found myself starting to point my own fingers at predominant religions or predominant belief systems or the local way people do things. And then as I started looking at cases at a broader level, we became U.S. Marshals, and we were looking at them all across the country. As I talked with my counterparts, if they were in the Deep South, they were worried about the Southern Baptists, and that everything's the Southern Baptists, and their religion is out of control. And you go to Chicago and it was the Catholics, and you go to Salt Lake City and it was the Latter-day Saints. And what I realized is this is where we really fall short, in my opinion, as these part-time judges when we sit in our rooms and point fingers, is that this really isn't about what the mainstream is teaching. These cults become successful because they step out on the fringe and they figure out how to recruit people who are like-minded. And we see this in this kind of a group, and what we're hearing here, the references back to Daybell, or and I don't even know that we want to mention the associate that is tied between Daybells and this group. But the thing that's common isn't anything but a survivalist mentality and this doomsday belief system that things are coming to an end. And I sometimes find myself watching and reading social media and others where people are slamming one faith tradition or another. And I think, holy cow, take a deep breath, because this has nothing to do
Right.
with that. This has to do with people who step out on the fringe, just like 9/11 had to do with people who stepped out on the fringe, not people who worship Islam.
Right. Yeah. Hold on one second. I had a little clip pulled up and it just started playing. So I wanted to just play a little piece of this interview with Ben, and he's just going to describe to us what he feels was his wife's state of mind when they left. So maybe we can get into that a little bit. I mean, look, I agree with you. There's crazy people everywhere, right? There's crazy people in every religion, every culture. I was just wondering if this was something that was, taught, believed. I don't know what
Yeah,
really the
well, that's
doomsday
an
prepping is
interesting.
all about. It's not, I'm from New York City. We don't know about doomsday prepping. People that I know that are doomsday prepping are doing it in case the zombies come. I mean, that's, like, it's not a second coming of Christ. So I wanted to get a little more insight into, what that is to help the viewers understand too. But let's watch this real quick first.
Yeah, and then maybe I can explain what I've learned about, for instance, Latter-day Saint teachings when it comes to preparation, food, things like that. That might help.
Yes, excellent, because he's going to tell Ben's going to talk about it. This was before, obviously, Blaze was found. This interview was on Thursday with Nate Eaton from East Idaho News.
My wife, Abby, and their uncle all believe in this rapture and this doomsday scenario that's about to happen according to the beliefs they have. And they three made the decision that now was the time to go gather. And Blaze's role in all of this, they believe he is something called a Davidic servant. So they felt like they need to protect him, and they needed to take him to this undisclosed location where he would receive his calling and understand his role in the second coming and the Savior's return to the earth. So that's how Blaze is involved in this. They see him as this Davidic servant that plays a significant role in the Savior's return.
And as far as these beliefs, Ben, as far as you know, I mean, has your wife been talking about this for, the past few weeks or months, or is this suddenly?
So then he kind of talks about how she really didn't get into it until like 2015 or something. But this is where I'm thinking, I'm watching this on last night and I'm thinking, I gotta call Mike. I gotta ask Mike what this means. What is the rapture? What is the Davidic servant? What is the second coming? What is the calling? Talk to us, Mike.
Yeah, these are all kind of interesting, and sometimes the definition is held by the individual, not by what mainstream religion would teach. So, whether it's rapture or Armageddon or the second coming of Christ, uh, those who believe in Christ as the Redeemer who's going to come back, whether they believe any of this or not, they have this belief system that when that happens, there's going to be cataclysmic events across the world as the world is basically cleansed, much like it was cleansed when Noah was running things. As far as the Davidic covenant, the way I've been able to understand that and the way it's been described to me, and hopefully the way I can maybe describe it that makes a whole lot of sense, is if you look at biblical references, and I hope I have this correct, and there's probably some biblical scholar out there that's going to chastise me and straighten me out here, but John the Baptist and Christ were through that bloodline of David, and John the Baptist, as the cousin to Christ, was kind of a precursor who was sending out that warning that the Christ was coming. And so this Davidic covenant is this kind of a promise that biblically that a descendant of that same family, that David family, is going to come to reign over the people of God. And that would be, if you put all that in Q, would be Christ if you looked at the original biblical way. But this Davidic king is a figure who God would send to kind of secure the land, get things ready, and usher things in. Now, I could be way off because I think sometimes these are definitions that people put together trying to make sense of something that biblical scholars have fought about for centuries. But here's the real crux of these things is what these cult leaders do is they take things that are familiar, have some sense of authority to it, and then they twist it for their own needs or their desires or whatever. And so you look at what's going on here in this group, short of Blaze, who just happened to be the one that they all believed was going to be this Davidic hero. And they're all doing something that I see consistent with cults that I've investigated, cults that I've dealt with in ritual crime. And that is, they're setting themselves apart and above all others. They have more light and knowledge than other people. They have a better dispensation and a view of the future. And I don't know about those listening, but I haven't heard of anybody who is from a mainstream religion, a forward, open, transparent religion that doesn't just say, yeah, the Bible says nobody knows when Christ is going to come. But apparently this group of three, at least, did know because they were putting this wacky plan together.
And somebody said right here too, Dater asks, profiling evil cult, etc. is mentioned. Is the mother part of a cult? What is the definition of a cult?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because I see this buffalo in the background of your screen there, Melanie, and we were laughing and talking a little bit about college football, college football, professional football, baseball. Heck, if you believe in, Reese's peanut butter cups, any of these things can be cultish behaviors, cultish feelings. I mean, you go to some professional sports teams and you see people that have painted their face and they're acting like absolute crazy people, and that is a cult. So we can't just say because there's a cult, it's wrong, because some aren't. Cops
right. I mean, I followed the Grateful Dead around for my entire life, and that is definitely like a cult. I mean, there are people who did nothing but travel around from city to city following the Grateful Dead, selling veggie bagels. That's what they did. And that was their life. And it was a part of my life for a long time too. So yeah, I get it. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing unless they're doing bad things, right?
And that's the key. And so what the experts, because I came into cult expertise from a very peculiar way, and that was as an investigator who had to look at these kinds of crimes as I deal with, people like the late Dr. Margaret Singer or Dr. Yanya Lalick, Rick Ross, who are all friends of mine. The things that I've learned over time is the fact that we got to kind of put these groups into buckets, and we need to recognize that there are cults and then there are destructive cults. What was happening in the Daybell case is a destructive cult. What happened in Guyana, destructive cult. The People's Temple. When you look at Heaven's Gate, you see these kinds of cults that are very different, and people want to tie cults to religion, which I think, again, is a really unfair thing for any of us to do.
Mm-hmm. Look at Charles Manson. I mean, was that a religious cult? That was just...
Well, yeah. And, they say that there are at any given time about 5,000 cults operating around the world. So they're not going away. They're going to continue. And cult leaders are going to use the things that they learned perhaps in their youth or maybe throughout their life. And much of that is going to be religious-based training that they had. How to be responsible to a deity and be worshipful and other kinds of things. The difference between a mainstream church that's transparent is those churches are about doing good and lifting others, and whether they're members or not, helping the downtrodden and trying to make the world a better place. And there may be some people who even listening tonight that will say, oh no, I personally was hurt by an ecclesiastic leader or something. I wouldn't disagree with that there have been people who have made big mistakes, but the religion in those kinds of very transparent mainstream groups, the religion doesn't say, hey, end of world's coming, you ought to go run off to the hills and kidnap kids and sexually abuse children. It's the destructive cult that is, the real focus is, it's usually about the leader, and that leader is saying everything is about me and satisfying my needs and my wants. And they twist doctrine, they twist people's belief systems. They go through a process that we called searching and separating, where they immediately strip people away from their support system. And they say, no, you're no longer going to communicate with your family. This is your family now. They do all these things in secret to try to maintain control, but it's destructive in nature, and it's usually all about the leader.
Yeah, they isolate them. This kind of, it was reminding me of Keith Raniere and Nexium. That did not have a religious component as far as I know, but that was definitely a cult, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, their big push initially was that we're kind of a group that's helping you become better professionally and all kinds of things.
Right.
But it was all pointing back to the leader.
Yeah. And he was like a charismatic god. He made himself a god. So if we're going to look at this group, as a cult, who's the leader of the cult, in your opinion? If you're calling this a cult, this little Brooke Spring Abbey, or do you think that they were going to meet other people?
So that's the real question, isn't it?
That said something here. Let me pull this up, because this I found interesting. Tina Mindful says other LDS supporters have also been spotted in Alaska. Just asking for a friend.
Other LDS supporters. I don't know what that means.
Maybe other members of a certain branch off group.
Yeah, again, I would
Alaska?
Caution against, in any of these things, pointing back to the mainstream belief system or faith tradition, because these people that get involved in these things, while they may have even held positions that had some semblance of responsibility or authority, when they start doing these kinds of things, I have not seen a faith tradition yet that is a standardized faith tradition that is supportive of those kinds of things. Do they have members who go off the deep end and participate in those things?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But every organization does, including every profession. And so as we get up on our soapboxes and kind of point fingers, I keep trying to remind myself, and whenever I have a chance to talk, remind others, before you say that's because of a religious group or because they are attorneys or they are cops,
Priests.
allow people to be individuals and be wacko. And there's no question these people are wacko when they do stuff like this.
Well, what I really was thinking, because you had mentioned this in your notes to me earlier, is that you had the idea that perhaps, Brooke Hale was creating his own cult.
And that, he very well could be. I mean, it's really interesting when you look at why are they picking this location in the Tok, Alaska area, for instance. Is it because there he feels like he can do his thing and get completely away from it, and he really believes all this stuff and he is the leader? Or are they migrating to somebody else's group that is the leader and they're going? And we just don't know that yet. And to theorize before we start to get more information is going to be, I think, kind of dumb of us right now. But what we do know is what's being reported, that these three were getting together on a regular basis, whether by phone or in person, and they were then feeding off of each other and saying, oh yeah, the end's coming, get your food storage, go buy survival gear, let's get our airplane tickets, and when the spirit hits me, I'm going to say go, 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 and we're all going to run out the door like we saw happen here. And they clearly spend a great deal of time planning and preparing. For them to pull this off in such a short amount of time really suggests that they've spent a lot of time planning and preparing. So it tells us about what their fantasy or their psychosis is.
Yeah. And do you think that, I was going to ask you what you think might have, spurned this? Is it all of the unrest that's going on in the world that would make somebody think, okay, this is it, it's going to happen? Because what we've seen in the past few weeks going on in the rest of the world could be very, very frightening to some people with a fragile sense of when the world is going to come to an end. And I could see how that might perhaps trigger something like this.
I think all you got to do is watch social media.
Yeah.
And when any event happens anywhere in the world, there are factions that start spouting off things like, this is proof that God is mad and he's coming after people, and somebody else that says something wacky. And I don't know if God's mad. I suspect, at least the God I believe in, that he's really disappointed when we do these stupid things. But it's also part of humanity and power structures and other kinds of things that are happening. And cult leaders are pros at taking these kinds of things and turning them against the group. A good example would be Warren Jeffs in the Colorado City area of Utah, and the FLDS group, the Fundamental Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That group, again, not affiliated with the Latter-day Saint Church, spun off 100 years earlier and made their own thing up. When the year 2000 came, that group knew the end of the world was coming, and they planned for it. And on January 1st of 2000, when the world didn't end, what did the prophet of that group do? He said, you guys aren't living spiritually enough. You're the reason why this isn't happening, because you're not ready. And so they take everything that's happening and they twist it for their own good.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. AKA the cat lady says, but is Mormonism considered a mainstream religion? Seems really small and insulated for that. Plus no transparency or dual consent. I'm not sure what she means by that, but I do think that Mormonism is a very, very large religion in the US. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's one of the faster growing. I guess you'd have to reach out to the Latter-day Saint faith. Of course, I live in Salt Lake City, so one thing I've done is I've learned that that Latter-day Saint Church refers to themselves as Latter-day Saint, not Mormons. It was a kind of a slang term that was started years and years ago because a scriptural prophet they have on their temples is this individual called Mormon. And so that kind of spun that off, I guess. But the Latter-day Saint faith certainly has worldwide influence. They put hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into humanitarian aid around the world. I would suggest they are mainstream. The difference is they have a different faith tradition than contemporary Christianity, and that sometimes boggles people's minds because the Latter-day Saint faith believes that God and Christ are individual people, where the rest of Christianity believes in the triad or the Trinity, that they are all the same individual. But they still believe in Christ. They still believe in God, as does Christianity, and they have, tens of millions of members.
Oh, 100%. I went to law school. I went to college in Boulder, and I went to law school at University of Denver because I did not want to come back to New York, and I loved it there so much. And during the time that I was out there, my family had a house in Park City, Utah. So I would do the drive from Boulder to Park City quite often. And when you're coming over the hill into Salt Lake and you see the Mormon temple, I mean, there's not a more beautiful building, I don't think, maybe in the country. It's gorgeous. It's almost like coming into Oz and seeing like this enormous castle. If some people out there don't know what it looks like, just look up a picture of it. It is really one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen.
Yeah, they are very pretty. And I'll tell you, when I look at some of the things that are done from a humanitarian standpoint globally, it's pretty hard to not say they're doing what Christ taught people to do. And so I'll let anyone else figure out whether they believe it's a bona fide religion or not. But the thing I do
mainstream,
know,
yeah. But I think there are a lot more LDS, a lot more in the LDS faith than people know if they don't live in or near the Midwest, right? Or the West. I mean, that's where it's more concentrated in the US, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously Utah has a huge number, although like Salt Lake City government is almost always been someone who is not a Latter-day Saint as the mayor. And so there's really interesting diversity. I think people want to believe that it's just this closed down state of people that fit whatever this Latter-day Saint mold is that they believe. But and we're all kind of going off target of where we were. I guess the thing I want to say
is when we started philosophical discussions.
Yeah, this is because I go and talk to my counterparts especially when I was investigating these cults, and I go into Western Pennsylvania, and everything that was going wrong was the Amish, or and so again, I just caution us all to take a deep breath and don't point a finger too fast. But it's wacky people that are making these crazy things.
There's crazy people in every religion. Becky Buck says, we do believe very much in the second coming and tribulations preceding it that have been foretold in the Bible. Food storage and personal preparedness have been taught for decades. And I did read that also in an article that is very common. Janelle Woodward says, Bible also says no one can know the time of the rapture.
There you go.
Lane Campbell,
I guess unless you're in some of these special groups, and they seem to know, but
Catholics aren't taught the Bible. Yeah, unless even in Catholic school, we weren't really taught the Bible. I have to say that, I'm sure we were supposed to learn about the Bible in theology class, but we really didn't so much. Becky says, Davidic servant solves it biblical, I believe, but I'd never heard of it until the Daybell case. It just seems that there are a lot of cases lately that are causing us to learn about this a little bit more. Thanks, Robbie, for the super sticker. I appreciate you.
Melanie, I think, again, I got to go back to just saying this one more time, is that a couple of things I investigated when we were doing ritual crime in the state. We had over 300 bona fide cases where law enforcement referred them up to the Attorney General's office, and we went out and we looked at those cases. And I'll tell you, I chased Satan for a lot of years, and I chased all these groups that were supposedly doing these horrendous kinds of things. And the one thing that I found consistent was it didn't matter that group leader taught and built their cult and the belief system of their cult, the way they prayed or the way that they feigned worship or whatever else. They built it around what they learned as children, and whether it was sitting in catechism, is that the right word? In a
Yeah.
Catholic school,
Catechism. That's right.
or if they were Buddhist, they taught it based on what they knew. And that's the thing about these cult leaders that I think we have to keep reminding ourselves, is that it's all about the leader, and they're going to take truths or pieces of truth, and they're going to twist it for their own demented, sick needs, and they're going to use it to turn people against themselves.
Well, I guess that brings us to we can talk a little bit about, well, we already kind of covered all of this stuff about Blaze, unless anybody has any further questions about Blaze. But I mean, this cult discussion is so interesting, and the fact that you wrote a book recently and you took down that cult in Utah, the Society of Zion. I mean, that's fascinating to me. In 1991, when you sent me, I was watching that Dr. Phil episode that you sent me, and I was blown away by the women that came out to talk about that. But we can cover that at the end. I know that you had something to share to the screen. I'm not sure what that was.
Yeah, let's just pop that up for a second. And all I wanted to do on there is for people that were kind of trying to understand this crazy thing. What I did is that on the day that Blaze was, in my opinion, abducted, he was taken from Phoenix, and they flew direct from Phoenix to Boise, Idaho. And so that part's pretty easy. The question becomes, why did they choose Boise? And we know that Brooke Hale came from Provo, Utah, which, if you can see my cursor, is right about here. And you know where it is, Melanie, but some of those watching don't. But and then Brooke either drives or he flies to Idaho Falls. And there's something that I'm really intrigued by that I can't wait to hear more about. And that was the press release showed this white Lexus with a dealer plate. What's the origin of that dealer plate? And I didn't study it. I don't know if it's a Utah dealer plate, or did he somehow get something and take it for a test drive and steal the car somewhere? Or why on earth does this guy have a dealer plate? And to me, that's kind of significant. The fact that he withdraws $50,000 and goes and sends in essence a termination note of relationship is really clear that he planned on going away and not doing anything and not being followed or anything else. The thing that becomes interesting is then they start their drive, and everybody was theorizing where he might go at first. And then we learn that they used their passports and go across the Canadian border. So then we see him start to make this change and move up here. But I don't think anybody thought they'd take that Alcan highway and just continue and galump along, clear up to the Tok entry, which is that port of entry that they stopped at. In fact, I'm going to just kind of zoom in on that for a second.
The Alcan Port of Entry, I believe. The
Yeah.
Alcan Port of Entry. So they crossed into Canada, and I think that that's how they tracked them, because they knew their passports were used to get into Canada, right? And then they were coming back into Alaska.
So if we were to go back out on this real quickly, and hopefully this isn't boring people, those who are kind of used to watching me know I always end up going to a map for some reason or another. But that Canadian border, there are a couple of major port entry positions there where people can come in, and as they come into the country, pass through. They picked up, and I was trying to capture which one that was. Maybe it was here, but that once they go through that, it triggers the alert that attempt to locate had been put out on the kids by then. after they went through, and they were able to then prove that they had made it through there. Traditional means of investigation probably failed at that point, though, because if in fact they were all just living off of cash at this point, which there would be no other reason for him to withdraw $50K if he was still going to use his credit card, then we lost all opportunity to see what transactions they might have made along the way. Because you think about that car, and this is the cop in me, but immediately I went to Boise and then to Tok, where they were arrested, and it's about 2,400 miles ish.
It's about a
4,000
40-hour
kilometers.
drive. I mapped it
Yeah,
too.
yeah, I think you're right.
Directions, 40 hours it would have taken to drive.
So that's really
track.
significant, because you think about that Lexus, and I did some research on the vehicle, and that Lexus is on average about 18 miles a gallon on the freeway, which means they would have had to have stopped 8 times between Boise and Alaska to fuel. So if there would have been credit card transactions or something, law enforcement could have had a better track on where they are. But no, I don't know that anyone ever expected them to continue north that far and try to get back into the United States through Alaska. And the thing that I thought was kind of interesting as I mapped it all out was, here's where they were arrested on the border. You have this little triangle of roads between Fairbanks and Anchorage down here, and then that eastern port area that you were talking about on the border, which is over in Tok. But if you look at the cellular structure, if they had been using their own cellular devices rather than burner phones, they wouldn't have been able to even track them then. So it was really miraculous that somebody at the border had the insight when they checked them, and that they'd already red flagged them to stop them and make the arrest there. And I'm still kind of troubled by the fact that they and when you can pull that map off, I just thought, oh yeah, one other thing is, the other thing was just that if that was their destination and they wanted to fly, they could have flown up there, so this was all about deception and keeping it from people who might find out. And again, I hope, and you can go ahead and drop that map off, but I hope that we get some clarity on the DL plate, the dealer plate, and some of those transactions that occurred along the way. And if Blaze will ever learn at what point he said, hey, we're not going to Disneyland here, there's something wrong.
Right. Well, I had read that the car had been outfitted for off-roading. It had 33-inch tires, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. I was looking for the article. But obviously they needed the vehicle, because wherever they were going, they needed to have a vehicle that would be able to travel there. So I think that's why they didn't fly. And perhaps maybe he worked at a car dealer. Maybe that's how he had the dealer plate. I don't know. I haven't heard much about what not Blaze, but what Brooke Hale does for a living. Do you know any more about him?
Well, no, I actually pulled some information on what he's done in the past, but I don't know what he was doing at the time. The other thing I don't know is if he was divorced or still in a relationship, or
he was divorced. I did read that, and that's why he left that sort of last will and testament note for his children to actually divvy up his property between them. He was going through a bad divorce, and Ben had filed for divorce just a week before. And that's why he had to go into court and get that emergency motion for custody on Tuesday, so that he could actually, make a case that his son should be returned to him.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about that before we left this story, because you asked the question of why did they have to do it then? And if you think about it, when you think about criminal cases that you've handled and other kinds of things, as an investigator, what you look for is that precipitating moment, something that said, the fuse is lit, we got to roll now. Because they had the plan in place, whether it was finances or something else. But the one thing that seems really plausible to me is, all of a sudden, mom's ability for perhaps housing, money, everything else could all of a sudden become really jeopardized. And most importantly, if they believed that kid was their Davidic messenger, access to that kid would be changing really quick too if
Yeah.
dad was successful.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is the divorce filing, and I have a copy of it and a copy of the emergency motion. If you guys want to do that another day, I'm happy to go through the documents with you, the legal documents. But in the divorce filing, they asked for joint custody. So that's why this was so interesting. And he also agreed to give her maintenance or spousal support, alimony, what used to be called alimony. So she was going to be provided for. Maybe in her mind, it was sort of a trigger, like, okay, my marriage is over. Now I can just leave. In her mind, maybe
Yeah.
she had some sort of tie to her husband and she couldn't, in good conscience, just leave
Yeah.
him.
And
I know.
maybe if she had some idyllic fantasy about marriages being perfect and that tied to her religiosity or something else, as long as that guise was happening and they were continuing in letting people think they were a perfect couple and a perfect family and a perfect marriage, all of a sudden the idea that this would become public and some of my warts might be exposed to could be one of those precipitating things that cause people to say, all right, now I'm going to light the fuse and get going.
Well, they have 5 children together, and Blaze is the only minor child. So he's the only child of theirs under 18. And I found this interesting too, because during that entire interview with Ben, the dad, which went on for maybe 20 minutes, he didn't really mention his daughter at all. It was kind of, that was interesting to me. And also for the 10 minutes in my legal career that I handled divorce cases, do you know what the busiest season for divorce is? The busiest season
The
for
holidays?
divorce is the August before the last child goes to college. Because
Ah,
so many people say, I'm going to stay until my kids are in college, and then I feel like I can get the divorce because they're in it for the kids a lot of the time.
wow.
So, yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic that sort of happens when the last kid goes to college, and then all of a sudden the parents, whichever spouse it is, feels like, they can get out.
Crazy.
Yeah. It really is. Let's see if we have some more questions here for you because you're such a special guest. Everybody wants to
Oh,
talk to
Brian.
you. Princess Mish says, I'm wondering how the mom got Blaze out of school without having custody or the father's permission. Well, there was no custody order in place because they had just filed. So she had every right to get him out of school, which is interesting. Let's see what else we have here. I think you wanted to talk a little bit about cults and in general, what kind of people do cults target? What kind of people do they want and what kind of people join? Is it people who need a sense of belonging, who want to be part of something? They feel they're lonely.
Yeah, exactly. I often, when I think about that, I go back to a quote by the late Margaret Singer, and I think I have it in the very front of my book. But she was just this incredible clinical psychologist with expertise in coercive mind control kinds of things. But she said, we know that people can be led to believe to buy almost anything. And she was talking about advertising, but she said, in addition to buying almost anything, people can be led to believe almost anything. And that cult leaders know that if we knew what we were in for from the get-go, we would never join a cult. It's just as simple as that. And so the first thing that we have to think about when we think about cults and cult dynamics is this is one big scam game going on. And cults, I used to think when I was a young investigator and I was starting to look into cults, I thought to myself, what kind of an idiot would join a cult? And what I've learned over the course of my career is that cults don't want the idiots. They don't want baggage that they have to care for and feed. They want people that are going to contribute and help the group to grow and help it become successful and carry on the mission. And so they're looking for the smartest of the smartest. And you brought up Keith Rainier. I mean, he was putting big name people out, people with tons of money. We know the families that were involved there. These groups aren't looking for a welfare case to carry down the road, which is one of those big differences between them and many traditional kinds of faith based churches that are saying we're here to lift the needy and do what we believe God and Christ want us to do, is to help those who are downtrodden. Cults don't want downtrodden people. They want people that are going to contribute, and they're going to bring them in and they're going to love bomb them like crazy, separate them from their support system. Like I said early on,
Right. Like isolation, like a narcissist would do.
But they are going to then just fill them with so much love and compliment. And these people come in and they're going, I've never been treated so nice. And then they start feeling the responsibility. So this grooming starts occurring by the cult leaders, and that grooming is done by experts. And you might think, some people that are groomers and experts, and you may have had a friend in high school who was always really successful at getting everything that he or she wanted. But these guys are the pros, and they know how to groom. Think of someone like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. They know how to groom, and they know how to take people to the edge and then cut them off from all the emotion until they come back in line, and they slowly bring them inch by inch along until they are so consumed in the cult that it becomes who they are as well.
Yeah, definitely. They're looking for people who will follow. But you're right. I mean, also people who have money in a lot of these things. I mean, some people think that Scientology is a cult. And part of Scientology is that you have to give a portion of your earnings to the church, right? Isn't it a certain percentage? So, yeah, I think you're right on there. Let's talk about your book for a second. I was trying to find the link, but why don't you talk about it while I find the link so I can pull up a copy of it? I put a link to your book in the description of this video, and I did watch the Dr. Phil episode. When was that Dr. Phil episode that you did?
It was about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. I've done 6 or so shows for Dr. Phil, and on that particular one, they kind of surprised me. This case, we rescued
talk about the case.
Children. We ended up rescuing 32 children. They were we convicted 12 adults for serious child sexual crimes. There were about 4,000 counts of rape and serious sexual assault against the children in this cult by the time we were able to infiltrate it and break it apart. Bus day was amazing, Melanie. I think we had 70 plus police officers as we hit the compound. And we had concerns, and they were validated of semi-automatic weapons being stored in the homes, and again, a doomsday belief system. But when the case came to a close, and it took about 2 years to work through the judicial process, and we finally, if you remember back in the early 90s, we were just punishing child victims by making them testify in prelims over and over and over. And you get a case like this, your 4,000 counts, that becomes a lifetime career for some of these victims if they were to continue to have to testify. Thankfully, one of the things that we felt so badly about was the fact that these children were being forced to testify over and again. And in a preliminary hearing, and maybe you could speak to this, but some defense attorneys are absolutely ruthless, knowing in a prelim that that's their only shot, because they wouldn't dare pull those goofy shenanigans off in a trial with a jury sitting there. It would just anger them. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, in New York, we use the grand jury system, so it's totally private, and we don't do prelims here. Everything's done by secret grand jury, and so it's not an issue. But yeah, I could see where that would be a big problem. And this, here's your book. I put your book up on the screen. It's called Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult by Michael R. King. Look at your famous author. This was in 1991 when you broke up this cult. And what I found so interesting by watching the Dr. Phil video was that it was 30 years later, and Dr. Phil brought on to the show 5 women, I think, that you had rescued from this horrible situation. It was one of the girls' grandfather that had been essaying him, as we have to say, on YouTube, and all of these girls in this house, and they were taught horrible things, like they had to have sex with each other and sex with the family, and it was riveting. It was a riveting show to watch, but I can't imagine how devastating that was for you to cover as a dad, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I mean, if anybody wants to see me crying, that's the time to do it, because that caught me off guard when I walked out and saw all those kids. I hadn't seen them in 30 years, and I purposely didn't have any contact with the victims of that crime after it happened, because I didn't want them to have a reminder of what happened. And they actually asked me to write the book Deceived, which we did, and they have become really important parts of our lives. In fact, we talk with and see them on a regular basis now, and so it's been really an amazing experience to see what their lives have turned out like, the challenges that they faced, and together we've accomplished some pretty amazing things. The thing I guess I'd just ask of your viewers is, number one, please buy the book. And I say that because I'm not making any of the money. We're using all the money to build a children's advocacy center that's actually set to break ground next month, Melanie. And that's a place where kids can be forensically examined prior to a criminal case going to court. They can receive a medical exam, psychological help. They can be prepared for the court system and be forensically interviewed, instead of the old days, like old cops like me asking them questions in a smoke-filled police department. We have experts who are doing it. And so we're just really excited about the fact that we've been able to contribute toward that. We were able to, over the last 2 years with book proceeds, pay for all of the site studies and get this thing ready to go. There's government money that's going to be paying the bulk of this, but we're pushing as much as we can. So please buy the book.
Buy the book, you guys. Buy the book. It's only $15. And if you want an autographed copy, how do they get an autographed copy, Mike?
Yeah, so if you just reach out to me at profilingevil@gmail.com, you can get, there are 2 books that I'm actually pushing right now. One is Deceived, and we'll get you an autographed copy of that. It's a great way to do Christmas. And if you're in the US, that is, I can get it right out. Otherwise, go to Amazon and you can get it on Amazon. I'm going to charge you $5 more than Amazon is going to charge you, so that I can cover the shipping to slow mail it to you. And then my second book that I really am pushing, Melanie, is a book called She Knew No Fear. And this is a murder investigation from 1891 that I solved 130 years later. And it just happens to be my great-great-grandmother who was gunned down in 1891. And it's a story about her life, her murder, and the investigation. And that one I'm doing
you
is...
solved her murder?
Yes. Can you believe it?
That's crazy. Wait,
Yeah.
so did you know that your great-great-grandmother had been murdered and it was a cold case, and you just took it upon yourself to go out and solve it?
Yeah, my entire life growing up, I remember my grandfather, who I didn't have a father in the home. My grandfather would take me fishing, and we'd sit at the cabin, and he had this old sheep herder stove, and he would be cooking cornbread in there, and he'd tell me about her being murdered. It was this is a story filled with Indian battles, and I got in trouble once for not saying Native American, and then the other day I got in trouble for saying Native American, and apparently either is appropriate. So please don't get mad at me, folks, if I have said something wrong here.
My people are really nice.
It was a
kind
crazy
people.
thing. The story went unsolved, and 130 years later, I was getting ready to retire from law enforcement, and I thought, I've been investigating murders my whole life. Why haven't I looked at this? And so it took about 10 years.
Wow.
And actually one day in the basement of an old county jail in Four Corners, Utah, I found the original arrest warrant, and it was for the wrong guy, but
Oh, really?
so anyway, kind of a fun story, and I am making money on that one. So know that you're going to be buying me a Diet Dr.
So
Pepper
which one
or
should we
something.
buy? Which one should we buy? We're just buying both. We're just buying both, right?
That's right.
I was going to say that, do you think that event, learning about that growing up, about your great grandmother having been murdered, do you think that shaped your career? Do you think that you went into investigative work because of that? Do you think that gave you an interest in it?
You know, I've often wondered that, and of course, I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I wanted to be one of two things. And my next door neighbor was a Salt Lake County deputy sheriff, and I thought he just walked on water. And his name was Larry Cisneros, and I just thought that guy's amazing. I wanted to either be a garbage man or a police officer. So I guess I wanted to work in the streets my whole life.
Wow.
And and thankfully I was able to do that, and I had a wonderful career, and since that career for the last 20 years now, I've been supporting law enforcement on intelligence kinds of things all around the world. So I kind of live in an airplane now.
Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting how we pivot at a certain age. That's what I did. I mean, I was a lawyer for over 20, 25 years. And then I decided I wanted to be an actress because I always wanted to be an actress as a kid. And so I didn't get to do that because I decided I wanted to go to law school instead, because I could write my own script and I didn't have to audition and nobody could tell me I didn't get the part, and I could still perform in front of a jury. And then after 25 years of doing that and I handled a lot of cases against the Catholic Church here on Long Island. I represented at least 50 or 60 of the survivors of clergy sex abuse here when the whole scandal
Oh,
broke in
goodness.
2002. And kind of sucked the life out of me. You know, I mean, you know what that's like. I'm sure that case sort of sucked the life out of you. And especially for me, because my clients didn't really have an avenue to pursue because the statute of limitations had expired in New York. So all the cases were thrown out. I tried everything. I tried fraud. I tried all kinds of different, the Catholic Church is very, very powerful in the state of New York, and they lobbied for years and years. Finally, it took 15 years to change the law here in New York, and they finally saw a little bit of justice. But, when you work on that for so long, it just can really take a toll on you. So I decided I was going to be an actress. And then I was doing that for a couple of years. And then now there's strikes, and, Duty Ron has a channel. He's like, why don't you come on and be a legal analyst and police off the cuff? I met Bill Cannon in acting class about 8
That's
years
awesome.
ago. And we had a Tuesday night scene study class. And every Tuesday night we'd be in New York City sitting in the back of this little room. And Bill was doing stand-up comedy at the time. And when he started doing his podcast and I started having nothing to do because now there was no work, and a friend said to me, why don't you just go on, Instagram or something and talk about the Murdaugh case? Because I'm always fascinated by this stuff anyway. I'm watching it anyway. So I did a couple of things, and Bill said, why don't you come on? And it kind of grew. And then I just started my own channel really in June of this year, and I'm up to 15,000.
Yeah, you've been knocking it out of the park.
But, pivoting in life, you're never too old to dream a new dream, everyone. That's my lesson for tonight. You're never too old to dream a new dream. And you can
Well,
do
and
something else.
last time I was in the office, I have an office at 100 Madison in Midtown, and we were going to go out and go on a road trip and go Heerman hunting, but then things fell apart. So next time I'm in town, we got to do that.
Let's do it. We totally will. Black Rose, thank you so much for your super sticker. She loves us both. Thank you.
That's
And thank you,
nice.
Run the World, for becoming a member. It's really a lot of fun here. Here's one last question from Sandy Banks. Again, why didn't Border Patrol have a red flag about the dealer plates? I don't know the answer to that question. Do you?
No.
But I will say, I mean, I am not law enforcement, but you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, that I think the reason that Blaze was found so quickly, because really we see a lot of missing children cases that go on for a very long time. Summer Wells is still missing, is because, number one, his father was so vocal, and he got out there and he did the interviews, and he got Nate Eaton to pay attention. And also the FBI got involved really quickly. And I think perhaps, you tell me what you think, that's why this case came to such a happy conclusion in 3 days, because I think he didn't even go to law enforcement until Tuesday or Wednesday, and he was found on Friday.
Yeah, well, if you think about the fact that it would take 42 hours to drive from Boise to where they were arrested, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Having all of those assets helping is a great benefit. But if in fact, and I think it's going to prove out in this thing, when you think about the money and the dealer plate and some other things, there was enough insulation between them and a digital footprint that had they stayed just in Canada and changed vehicles and paid cash to buy another vehicle or something, they could have stayed on the lam indefinitely. I think the fact that they knew they were crossing into Canada, and then the Canadian authorities went on alert, and when that border crossing happened, I think that was the kiss of death for them.
Well, it's always nice to have good news for a change, right? We cover so many stories with such bad news, and it's good to have a happy conclusion for a change.
I agree.
Have any final thoughts for the viewers, Mike? It was so kind of you to come and spend part of your Saturday evening with me. So I thank you so much. We have so many other cases we could talk about. Like I saw you put out a video on Sally Smith, and we have been really digging into Sally Smith. So that's some interesting stuff.
Of course, and just so you know, I've actually listened to both of your last 2 videos on Maya's case. And I was in the chat room on both of them, and I sent 2 notes to you, and I thought, I'm not going to text you or anything because I didn't know you, but I've been watching, and I just love what you're doing there.
Oh, I like
and I've been doing a lot of court TV on that particular case. And, I mean, I had to, I got cornered on Sally Smith this week, and Judge Ashley Wilcott said, "So do you think she's evil?" And I think there were lots of mistakes made, but I always go, and I always say this on my channel, and you probably use this all the time too, but I always go back to Sherlock Holmes and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and that quote, "It's a capital mistake to theorize before you have all the facts," because insensibly we spend all of our time twisting facts to suit our theories rather than letting the facts unfold. And so I guess to kind of go full circle with where we were today, the idea is that don't jump to conclusions too fast, folks. Just let things kind of unfold, and allow your theories to change based on the flow of facts coming in, because that's what a good investigator does. And I know, Counselor, after having served as chief of staff in the Attorney General's office, that's how you all live your lives too.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that those were your final words, and that Sally Smith was in that conversation, because we have watched the case and I've done a deep dive into her background. It seems like she might have had a little confirmation bias. So I'm going to say that she went in there and did maybe twist the facts to suit her narrative, because Maya is not the first case. In fact, there are other cases pending that the same law firm is handling. But I'm going to save a little something for my viewers, because I'm working on a show about other cases involving Sally Smith, and she has a long and storied history of doing exactly that, separating kids from their parents. So
I'll be watching.
Yes, thank you. It's how it is when you're doing a live show. It's hard to watch the chat. So if you did chat, I probably didn't see it, because I have to really kind of focus on. And I'm a one-woman show, like you are too. So when you're doing everything yourself and trying to do the media, and I'm new at this, and I'm technologically not very skilled. So, it's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a great community that we're building. And I just want to thank you to my moderators for your amazing work tonight. You always keep the chat classy. You do a fantastic job. It's really become a safe place for people to watch the Maya coverage, because I've watched the Law and Crime and the Court TV chats during the live streams of those cases, and they are filled with hate and vitriol. It's horrifying, the things that people put in that chat. I don't know if they don't have moderators. I don't know. But my moderators are amazing. I love you. Thank you to all of my subscribers, to all of my viewers, to all of my replay viewers, to all of my channel members. And thank you again to Mike King for joining me tonight. This was a great show. Good night, everyone.
Melanie. It was my pleasure.
See you real soon.